I'm just talking about her name, not anybody else in those records. A search for that. Nothing classified with the president or anybody else. I'm just asking, why not do a search for Tara Reade's name in the University of Delaware records?
Look, I mean, who does that search?
The University of Delaware. Perhaps you set up a commission that can do it. I don't know. Whatever is the fairest way to create the most transparency.
So you just saw there Mika Brzezinski pressing Joe Biden on whether or not an investigation into the Tara Reade sexual assault allegations should include a search of the records at the University of Delaware. And guys, this is actually a pretty significant development in this story. We just saw this coming out yesterday, right after that particular interview here on May 1st. You saw the New York Times editorial board calling for an investigation into the Tara Reade sexual assault allegations. Now, criticism of this particular formulation here, they're saying that the DNC should do the search. Definitely criticism there. Crystal Ball was criticizing that. But overall, this is actually a development in this story, a significant development, because they are even calling for an investigation into the records at the University of Delaware. You can see here, quote, "Any serious inquiry must include the trove of records from Mr. Biden's Senate career, which he donated to the University of Delaware in 2012. Now, the reason why this is such a big development is because there was a lot of concern that any investigation which would happen would just be sort of done on Biden's terms. The terms which Joe Biden was trying to set up both before that interview and then in the interview was that, look, any kind of record, anything which Tara Reade filed would be in the National Archives. The National Archives came out and said, look, we don't even have that kind of stuff. We wouldn't have that thing in our records, in our database. So no, it's not going to be here. But there was a lot of concern that the media was more or less going to go with that, because it did seem like they were going to initially be like, okay, well, we looked at the National Archives, that's it, dunzo, 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 name cleared. But that's not what is happening. We've seen over the past couple of days, both from the Washington Post and now from the New York Times, we've even seen stuff coming out from CNN saying, no, we need to look at the records at the University of Delaware. So this is actually a pretty significant development here. Now, guys, part of the reason why this is happening, part of the reason why we are seeing this pushback from the media onto Joe Biden now when we weren't previously, quite frankly, is because Joe Biden's campaign made the mistake of lying, or at least seriously misconstruing the original New York Times reporting when it came to this article. So, you know, it was something like 19 or 20 days. They took way too long to actually do the first reporting. But, you know, when the New York Times finally did that reporting after Bernie Sanders finally dropped out of the race, they finally, you know, released that reporting about the Tara Reade sexual assault allegations. It didn't clear his name, but Joe Biden came around. We saw from leaked talking points from BuzzFeed, and also we saw basically all the potential VP picks from Kamala Harris, Stacey Abrams, Kirsten Gillibrand, all running around using these talking points, saying that the New York Times article had cleared him. But that wasn't that's just not the case. The New York Times article really just kind of laid out what was happening. And in fact, there was even some corroborating evidence in that, which is that they found that, you know, when they interviewed the interns who were involved at the time, the interns said, yeah, I actually do remember Tara Reade suddenly and without explanation being removed from supervisory duties. So pretty interesting there, pretty interesting stuff, coming from that report. And basically, the Joe Biden campaign, like I was saying, just said that, oh, that cleared us. We don't need to think about that. Dunzo, dunzo, dunzo. But the New York Times got really pissed off about this, and understandably so, right? Like, the New York Times doesn't want to be seen as a complete shill, a complete hack for the Joe Biden campaign. That's not in their interest. That's not something that they want. And also, the individual journalists want to be seen as credible. So, you know, you pissed off the wrong people, and now they're pushing back on Joe Biden. So, big mistake from Joe Biden's campaign in that respect. Definitely something that was not gonna, definitely something that they were not particularly happy about. Now, one of the major developments which we are seeing in this story, we saw this coming out earlier today. Tara Reade supposedly, I'm going to get to Tara Reade's response to this. Tara Reade supposedly came out and said that the complaint will not include anything about both the sexual assault or the sexual harassment, because what she has been saying is that she filed a complaint, but that complaint did not include anything about the sexual assault, but that the specific complaint which she filed at the time was about a sexual harassment charge. And so this came out, and a bunch of people, including Joe Scarborough, was talking about how, she sort of changed her mind, how, she was initially saying that she was talking about sexual harassment. Now she's removing from sexual harassment. Tara Reade just about an hour ago coming out denying this report. You can see here the AP politics here. Tara Reade says Senate report filed against Joe Biden didn't refer to sexual harassment or sexual assault. Tara Reade's Twitter here saying that this is false. So how this exactly leaked out, I'm not sure. I was trying to dig through it. I spent like 20 minutes kind of trying to dig through, figure out, what was the first sort of source of this. I wasn't able to identify it. So I'm not quite clear how this false information got out, that Tara Reade had said this. Not particularly clear. Someone's going to need to get to the bottom of that, and and I'll keep looking myself, see if I find anything. But so far I haven't been able to. And by the way, guys, so the other big sort of development in this story, which we're seeing and which we're going to need to follow here, is that the New York Times put this article out. Yep, that was earlier today, saying that the allegation against Joe Biden, the way that they're doing it, is really putting the burden on the women. So if you actually go through, kind of on Twitter, what they're talking about here is that, the way that the Joe Biden campaign presented this thing was, when it first came out, they thought that the best way to handle this, the best way to do this, is to have women going forward and denying this allegation for Joe Biden. So we saw it was either the deputy campaign manager, the deputy campaign spokesperson, I think, who's a woman, coming out saying that this definitively didn't happen, et cetera, et cetera. And we've seen all of Joe Biden's potential VP picks, Kamala Harris, Stacey Abrams, Kirsten Gillibrand, et cetera, all coming out saying, oh, this didn't happen, or that I believe Joe Biden, or, following the talking points where the New York Times supposedly said that this thing didn't happen, And so as a result, what's happening on Twitter is that, you can find all these videos that are, basically becoming memes of Kirsten Gillibrand or Kamala Harris or Stacey Abrams, whatever, saying one thing about Christine Blasey Ford and then saying the other thing about, Joe Biden, and playing them next to each other. And so this particular New York Times article is, really criticizing Joe Biden here, saying that, look, the way that you did that, the fact that you did it that way, basically means that the women are taking the brunt of the damage here, as opposed to you, as opposed to Joe Biden coming out and taking the brunt of the damage. It ends up just being the women who are taking the damage. And so the New York Times is criticizing the Joe Biden campaign for this tactic. Now, this is actually pretty significant and just a general lesson which people are going to have to learn, because the Joe Biden campaign actually thought, we've seen some from some reports now, the Joe Biden campaign actually thought that that was good strategy, right? That's the way that they wanted to handle this. Now, there's maybe two reasons for this. Some people think that the reason why is because they were worried that Joe Biden would get on an interview and then start stumbling over himself. But then there's also just the concern that they genuinely thought that having women, sort of denying the allegation would look better for Joe Biden, as opposed to, a white older man denying the allegation. But clearly that was not, and quite frankly, like, I could have told you straight away that that was not going to be, good optics, that was going to look bad. But, they didn't ask me. But but anyway, yeah, so that's one of the major developments, one of the major lessons which we're going to have to follow, which is that a lot of people are really criticizing the way that Joe Biden put the women out front and let them take the damage, as opposed to him standing up and, denying the allegations himself. It took weeks and weeks and weeks for Joe Biden to finally have any kind of questions, any kind of interview on this. Now, to be clear, I mean, they're criticizing the Joe Biden campaign here, but honestly, the the issue is also with the journalists, because there were a lot of interviews which Joe Biden had in which the journalists didn't ask. Now, of course, they no doubt set up that interview and then were like, explicitly under the, agreement that they were not going to be asking that question. But, if you're a real journalist, at least in my opinion, you should still be asking those kinds of questions, and your access be damned. I mean, that's your job, in my opinion, right? But they didn't do that. So I don't think that, personally, I would say that the fault is not entirely with the Joe Biden campaign. It's also with the media and with journalists not being, not willing to, risk their access in order to do something like that. But it is something just basically that you should be following, that you should be watching how that sort of narrative plays out into the future if you want to, sort of keep up to date with this story. And the other big thing which is really shaping and really driving this story is specifically this here. So, or at least resulting from this here. So we saw this coming out that Tara Reade was initially going to be on Fox News for her first major cable sort of interview on Sunday. It was going to be pre-recorded on Friday, but Tara Reade abruptly canceled. She canceled because she didn't want to be on Fox News. She was also receiving a lot of death threats. And so Tara Reade really, really wants her first cable, sort of appearance to be on either CNN or MSNBC, right? She doesn't want her first major appearance to be on Fox News. And you got to look at this from her perspective, guys. She's a lifelong Democrat, right? She does not want to be seen as a Republican agent. She does not want to be seen as someone who is helping Donald Trump. Now, this is the way that a lot of sort of establishment Democrats are seeing it, but she doesn't want to be seen this way. I mean, she's a lifelong Democrat. I mean, she was working for the Biden, working in Biden's office in the 90s, right? So she's a lifelong Democrat, and she really doesn't want to be seen this way. And, that really is shaping the way that this is coming out, because MSNBC and CNN are not inviting her on to their networks. And so it's only Fox News, and only Fox News is just begging her basically at this point to come on, because they know that this would be just a ratings bonanza, right? So Fox News has been begging, and apparently actually there were a lot of people at Fox News who were quite upset about this, about her abrupt canceling, because I mean, this is the kind of thing that you really, really prep for. You spend a lot of time doing research, and then, she cancels, and then, you wasted your time. So there are a lot of people who are upset at her at Fox News for, canceling like that. But my point here is this, this is really something that we need to look at and that we want to think about when we're watching this story and really trying to understand it, which is that she doesn't want to be perceived as helping Donald Trump. She just wants to be perceived and seen as someone who's, sharing her truth and bringing her story forward. She doesn't want to be perceived as a kind of a Republican agent, even though that's the way that a lot of people are, portraying her at this point. And it really is shaping the way that this story is coming out, because she's, she's turned down at this point multiple Fox News interviews, and she's really holding out, really hoping for an MSNBC or CNN interview. Will that happen? I don't know. We'll have to see. We'll have to see if that materializes. It's unclear at this point whether or not that is going to happen. So anyway, just wanted to give you guys my thoughts on this and tell you guys sort of the kinds of things that you're going to need to be following when it comes to this story if you want to be able to, sort of stay informed and, sort of follow the story for yourself. So anyway, if you like the video, I'd appreciate it if you hit the like button and consider subscribing. Thanks.